Committee hearing where we will review the 2022 liquor objections list from City Attorney Zach Klein's office. I'm Councilmember Emmanuel Remy, Chair of the Public Safety Committee. A reminder that this hearing is currently live on YouTube and Facebook and is also live and being recorded for rebroadcast on CTV, Columbus's government television channel 3. The rebroadcast schedule is available at www.columbus.gov. Each year, Columbus is required to submit any objections to the renewal of liquor permits within the city by December 31st. Throughout the calendar year, the City Attorney's Office works with community leaders, Columbus Police, Fire, Health, Building and Code Enforcement, as well as various state entities, including the Ohio Investigative Unit, to identify and investigate liquor permitted locations that have violations of state and city code and chronic criminal activity, including violent crime, overdoses, and liquor violations. Proposed objections are then presented to council and, if approved via resolution, are sent to the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. The objection does not result in any immediate change to business operations. The City Attorney's Office is committed to working with these businesses to enact appropriate security and safety improvements for their establishments and surrounding neighborhood. Tonight, we will hear a presentation from Assistant City Attorney Sarah Pomeroy over the 13 items on the 2022 objections list. A handful of objections remain from the 2021 liquor objections list that have not been given a hearing date before the Division of Liquor Control and have not yet fully been resolved, so we have to renew them. Until a final agreed solution can be reached with the businesses or until a decision is made before the division, the city will renew the following objections from last year. The city is still negotiating with these businesses, and this list is subject to change. To this point, we have one objection that, as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, was removed from the list. An operation called Midway has been resolved, and council will no longer consider a renewed objection for Midway this cycle. This is council's first time reviewing this list in a separate public hearing from our regular Monday council meetings, in the hope to give more time for presentation and discussion ahead of any vote. Without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Assistant City Attorney Sarah Pomeroy for the presentation. I also see Detective Gant and Sergeant Comrode here as well. Thank you for being here and joining us. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Remy. City Council, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I have a brief presentation that will essentially go through the liquor objection process, what we do throughout the year, how we conduct our investigations, our evaluations, and then furthermore, I'll be presenting each of the locations, the 13 that were mentioned just now. So globally, I guess to start, I am a member of the City Attorney's Zone Initiative, which is a division within the City Attorney's Office that is designed to effectively enhance communication between neighborhoods, between various city departments, especially including the Columbus Police, Code Enforcement, varying building and code enforcement and other city departments, a lot of which are part of our evaluation throughout the liquor process throughout the year. Each zone attorney is actually assigned an area of the city. So in my other parts of my job, am assigned the northern end of town. That's Police Zone 1. But we also each have responsibilities for citywide issues, and one of those is liquor objections. So that is why the liquor objection process falls within sort of the nuisance abatement world. And a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight is actually dovetails with the cases that we then bring in environmental court. So there are 8 major steps to the permit objection process. First of all, we spend a significant amount of time throughout the year identifying and investigating locations as we get towards the end of the year. Because we have a December 31st deadline, there is an evaluation that is conducted based on everything we are learning throughout the year, based on discussions that we're having with businesses, with community members, and that goes into when we then bring these recommendations in front of City Council, and then the process continues from there. And we'll just tick through each of these. So first and foremost, and the vast majority of our work throughout the year is in partnership with all of the entities that council member just mentioned, police, Ohio Investigative Unit, the fire department, public health, code enforcement, building, licensing. There's a lot of entities that basically we work with throughout the year to identify locations that may be not, let's say, complying with various aspects of the law, whether it's city code, state code, or whether that might have chronic criminal activity, chronic liquor violations, things like that. The whole process also includes a lot of community work in terms of talking to area commissions, civic associations, block watches, and other community members who are often actually the first to identify places throughout the year, and tell us what they're experiencing as a neighbor to whatever the business might be. As we're evaluating whether or not a location potentially merits an objection, the factors that we're considering are obviously liquor violations, narcotics activity at a location, drug sales, high levels of crimes of violence especially. We're looking at gunplay, so that would be shootings, other felony assaults, robberies, additional crimes also where alcohol or intoxicated individuals might play a role, and then also health code violations. Obviously, markets and bars are subject to a whole host of requirements under the health code. So all of that goes in to what we might be evaluating. As issues come up throughout the year, we don't just wait for the end of the year to notify an owner that there might be a potential issue. What ends up happening, let's say a shooting occurs at a bar, or we find out that there's been a drug purchase in front of a store or inside a store. The CPD PACT unit, and I have here Detective Josh Gant, will actually send out a warning letter to each location, basically saying, hey, here's what, the activity that happened at your establishment, and then that usually is a good kickoff for discussions with patrol officers, community liaison officers, the actual business, community leaders, and sometimes it doesn't actually take one of those events to start those conversations, but usually that is what tends to bring people to the table and put places on our radar. I will say this year more so than each of the prior few years, we've actually done an incredible job, and again, kudos to Detective Gant, to sending out warning letters after major violent incidents have occurred throughout the year. It's actually led to, I think, reducing the number of places we're evaluating now, because throughout the year we've either had a discussion with a landlord that says, okay, that business needs to go, or we've had a discussion with a business and the business says, okay, I'm going to implement security XYZ, or some businesses will then transfer ownership and we actually then start to talk to a new person. So I think each year we've gotten a little better with sort of this year-long process and communication, such that we're not all focused on everything triage right now at the end of the year. And then the last piece I'll sort of mention, all of this identification and investigation goes into also when we file nuisance abatement lawsuits. So a lot of these factors that I've just listed are also potential evidence that we would use in a nuisance case. And that is also another avenue through which we can address these safety issues, is that perhaps a place is at such a level that we need to file a nuisance case in environmental court to potentially close it down or to implement security recommendations faster. We continue to file, my office does, throughout the year, and that again sort of reduces what we end up evaluating at the end of the year. So throughout that evaluation, that's what brings us here. Our office then makes recommendations to council, which council can then adopt via resolution. Establishments, though, once, let's say, council does adopt any of these objections, the establishments continue to operate between the time period of the objection and then the public hearing before the Division of Liquor Control. During this time period, which can take up to 9, almost 12 months now, we're still sort of suffering from a little bit of a backlog from COVID. We don't wait necessarily for those hearings to get scheduled to start talking. In fact, we're already in conversations with a handful of the objections that are up this year now. Our main, I guess, under the liquor code, what we are really focused on under Title 43 of the Ohio Revised Code is we're looking at whether or not the public decency, sobriety, peace, and good order of the community is jeopardized by a certain location continuing to have a permit. That is why all of this violent crime evidence plays into this. That's why the drug evidence plays into this, overdoses, obviously liquor violations as well. But really, we are looking at whether or not an establishment is a good steward of its permit. Last bit of process, and before we get into the actual locations, so we had a handful of outcomes from this objection process. So you get to the division, the objection might be sustained, meaning we have a hearing, we put on evidence and show that the objection was merited. The division may decide to actually overrule it and say, no, the city did not meet its burden in submitting the objection. Sometimes businesses actually choose to forfeit their permit, meaning we object, we explain sort of all of the reasons that led us to this objection, and the business decides, you know what, this is not what I need to continue doing, and then the business either transfers, moves, goes under new ownership, they forfeit the permit. There's a lot of potential avenues for that, but I would say the vast majority of the time, and I think a great product of our process is actually reaching an agreement between the city and the actual permit holder. A lot of times this agreement can include security requirements, various operating procedures, employee training. It could be everything from exactly the scanner that an ID needs to go through to purchase liquor at the location to actually requiring security guards. It very much just kind of depends on the location, and certainly markets are sometimes a little different from bars, but the vast majority of the time we reach that agreement because we think it's a good middle ground of accountability for what has happened in the past and assurances for the neighborhood moving forward, while also allowing a business to continue to operate. Those agreements then become filed nuisance abatement lawsuits in environmental court, so there's some sort of enforceability. All right, so you're going to see up on the next few slides that there are a handful of common liquor permit types. There's a lot of other classifications of liquor permits that are in the code. This list here, C classes and D classes, are going to be the ones that you'll see for each of these, for these places tonight. The most common for your markets and gas stations are going to be the C1 and C2 permits. Those are for carryouts, not on the premises consumption. And then most of the D permits are going to be for consumption at the actual location up until a certain time. And there are specific permits that allow you to go till 1 or till 2:30. Some bars have both. Some bars just go till 1. It just kind of depends. So you'll see when we talk about renewing a D6 permit, that's what this means. All right. So Councilmember Remy did refer to there being new objections and then renewed objections. We're going to start with the new objections, the places that were not on our list last year, but throughout the year have risen to the level that the city attorney feels like should be objected. And then I will talk more briefly about the ones that are renewed from last year, but are in varying stages of negotiation. All right, so first, and I'm actually going in sort of zone order, so area of town. We're actually going to start with the north end. This is Police Zone 1. First, we have the Beechcroft Newsstand. So this is at 1935 East Dublin Granville Road. This location has had a number of concerning gun-related incidents, including multiple crimes of violence, such as they had a shooting, a robbery, another felony assault, various weapons offenses, and they've had underage liquor and tobacco sales here. Calls for service have included responses to other gun incidents, intoxicated persons needing assistance, and drug transactions. As you can see, the calls for service might be a little low compared to some of the other ones we will see tonight, but the Northland community has specifically expressed its concerns with this business. It is part of a strip, basically, so there's like a Marco's Pizza, there's a UPS store, there's a number of other businesses in this strip, and from what I've heard from the Northland Community Council folks is that this is a location where this business, I think, needs to be doing its part in terms of making this location safe. And there's one other concerning incident where one of the shooting incidents was actually tied back to a drug house that we had shut down earlier in this year. So a lot of the same people who were selling drugs out of a house literally just around the corner were actually part of sort of a back and forth of gunplay here at this location. All right, so next we have the Dollhouse. So the Dollhouse is a bar and a strip club at 16880 Carl Court. Police have been called to this location for multiple incidents, including involving gunplay, shootings, a robbery, felony assault, discharging firearms, various other violent incidents, as you can see from the slide. Columbus Fire actually responded specifically to treat 5 persons suffering from an overdose just in this year alone. And as far as our bar locations that we are actually discussing tonight, this is our highest number of calls for service at 165. Of those 37, reports, there was especially a shooting that was recent that had 5 victims. It was a pretty major incident, and therefore we're recommending an objection just based on sort of the level of activity at this location. I will say, for council's benefit, we are already in discussions with council for the dollhouse just over the last few days, so certainly I'm willing to continue to talk to them. All right, moving on to our places that are actually in Police Zone 2. So first we're going to start with the Platform Lounge, and that is at 1058 Country Club Road. This is a location where, although there's a smaller number of incidents, probably our smallest relative to the other objections this year, police have responded to and documented reports of multiple violent incidents this year alone. They had very few incidents last year, but in comparison, this year it's definitely spiked up, and almost all of the runs and almost all of the actual police reports that were taken do involve some sort of crime of violence. So that's included a felony assault, discharging firearms, and at that felony assault, management was later actually charged with obstructing a homicide investigation there. And so there's definitely been some significant concerns so far from our investigation into the location. And even there was a follow-up liquor permit inspection that we just did a few weeks ago. And at the start of that inspection, they actually didn't want to let folks in to conduct a normal liquor permitted inspection. So obviously, even with the numbers being a little low, we have some concerns and therefore are bringing this one. All right, so next we have the Queen of Hearts, which is used to be known actually as the Pelican Club. This is kind of an interesting one in that currently, as it stands right now, Queen of Hearts is not open. It is, like, the business itself is actually closed down. But some people might say, okay, then why are we here? What's the point of this? There is still an active liquor permit here, actually issued to the folks who ran the Pelican Club. So a new permit was never actually transferred over to the business owners who are calling it Queen of Hearts. So this permit is still out there. It very much could be used to reopen again, and without any sort of parameters for either that permit being transferred elsewhere or for if someone else were to come into that location, we would have some serious concerns about a business reopening there right now. Our office actually filed a nuisance lawsuit against the establishment when it was known as Pelican Club about a year ago. We settled that in early 2022 with an agreed order, various security requirements, which a new owner was required to have continue. It did not happen, and there was an incredibly awful incident that happened just September 25th where there were 3 victims of a shooting, including 2 that passed away, one of which was a 17-year-old. Incredibly just concerning, and it did prompt the closing of Queen of Hearts and the vacating of them as a tenant. But again, we still do not have a resolution as to the permit, and that's why we're bringing that here tonight. Next, we have a Speedway on East Broads. That's 3304 East Broad Street. This is our location with the highest number of calls for service that we are bringing this evening and this year. We have started conversations with Speedway about a number of their Central Ohio locations. We I've had a couple good meetings, but again, this place being so high in terms of the numbers that we have and not having any sort of assurances and specific plan nailed down with them about this location, that's why we're bringing it tonight. As you can see, these numbers are actually, when you subtract out the calls that were made by hired CPD special duty. So there are actually more incidents happening and more calls happening. We always will, if someone's hired special duty, we will take those calls out because we understand that that is why you pay for special duty. But you can see multiple shootings, robberies, weapons offenses, shots fired, narcotics complaints, overdoses, including CFD themselves, absent police, responding to 7 just this year. So, just given everything, this is definitely a very concerning location that we'd like to, figure out if there's a safe plan for this. And if not, then we would ask the permit be revoked. All right, moving over into Police Zone 3, the west side. So First, we've got Mobile Mart, which is at 2635 West Broad Street. Police have been dispatched frequently to the location for multiple felony assaults, including a shooting, robberies, shots fired, additional weapons offenses. There's been a number of overdoses here, and then additional intoxicated individuals needing assistance, and various motor vehicle thefts. I will say a commonality across all of the objections is motor vehicle thefts. We certainly understand that that's been a concern this year, more so than most in the past, but so we always do try and track how many motor vehicle thefts there are at a location. And with this one in particular, Columbus Fire responded to 5 persons suffering from an overdose at the location. As you can see, the calls for service are 178 for the last 2 years with 36 police reports. One final note on this one, they had applied to actually transfer the ownership of this permit in August of this year, and we did object to that transfer. Typically what happens throughout the year, we'll get requests of new transfers and new permit requests, and we'll do the same sort of analysis we do here. We'll take a look at runs, we'll talk to community members, we'll talk to police, fire, health, everybody. And if something might merit an objection, then we will object to a transfer and potentially try and sit down with whoever the new owner is. If we haven't come to some sort of resolution with potential new owner, that's another reason why, we are here tonight, is because that transfer objection is still outstanding. We have all of the concerns I just outlined, and we still don't have any sort of resolution. We have not had communications with this location, even though we objected to that transfer in August. So where we are now, we're bringing this one for council to consider tonight. All right, and then next we've got the Spotlight Lounge, which is at 1662 West Mound. This is one where we are in the middle of an active nuisance lawsuit. So I mentioned that, throughout the year, we will file nuisance abatement lawsuits if potentially a location merits it. And this is one where we've filed it. We've had some preliminary discussions and, in fact, an initial closure and some initial, preliminary security uplifts and, limited hours and things like that. But we have not yet reached any sort of final solution for what the long-term safety plan is here. Discussions are very much ongoing, but until we have that final resolution, and frankly, until we have the final resolution in the nuisance case, that's why we're bringing this objection tonight, because this location has been cited both by OIU and by Columbus Police. Especially in June, there was an issue with OIU citing them for disorderly activity, hindering an inspection, drug possession, and various insanitary conditions. Police have also been called to the location for multiple shootings and robberies, other crimes involving violence. There's also been reports of illegal adult entertainment events at the location. So all of this obviously led to our filing, and you can see their calls for service are a little higher than some, but certainly not the worst that we see. But definitely we felt meriting our filing and meriting an objection until we can get everything resolved. All right, so next we've got, and this is the last of our new objections, moving into Police Zone 4, so this is in the northern part of the Short North. This is Julep at 1014 North High Street. I will briefly, my brief synopsis, and then I'm actually going to toss it over to Sergeant Kermode for just a second to explain a little bit about his experience with the location. But as you can see, police have responded to this location a number of times, 93 over the last couple years, and that is, again, not counting any calls from police special duty. But it's involved various violent incidents, including and then some liquor issues where there was passing of drinks from the patio out to people on the street, and basically staff not doing a whole lot to prevent that. CPD has responded to the location CFD has responded to the location to treat 5 different persons suffering from overdoses. And just for clarity's sake, I actually did have fire run the numbers for the adjoining addresses, since a lot of Short North addresses are bunched together. And the adjoining couple addresses each only had 1 or 2 each, and so this was sort of a spike if you're looking along this strip of High Street. But I will go ahead and ask Sergeant Kermode if he could just talk a little bit about his experience with the location, and he is able to provide additional details about the recent homicide that happened there.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Ramey. My name's Sergeant Joe Kermode. I was the head of the Short North Crime Interdiction Program, which operates special duty officers in the Short North Arts District on weekend nights from 11 p.m. to 4 in the morning. On September 5th, 2022, there was a homicide directly in front of Julep that involved the suspect of the homicide was an individual actively working as a security guard at Julep as a bouncer. We were able to confirm that via security footage from Julep. The homicide was committed directly in front of the bar by the security guard. No employees from Julep rendered aid or called 911. And the victim was found 10, 15, 20 minutes later by a passerby where we were summoned. Employees and security then obstructed the subsequent homicide investigation by detectives involving that incident. In other things we've had at Julep, there's a general lack of control at the outdoor patio. They allow individuals to openly pass alcohol to individuals hanging out on the outside outside the patio and walking by. We've seen individuals jumping over the patio wall, bypassing security, infrequent pat downs at the door. We've observed underage gang members inside consuming alcohol. We've also had multiple shots fired incidents outside the bar and other firearms and shots fired incidents in the Short North District where we directly asked the suspect, where did you come from? And they told us they came directly from Julep. So discussions I've personally had with management of Julep, they've been unwilling to fix observed and communicated issues that we've tried to resolve with them on the nightly basis. They did have infrequent special duty officers, but the Columbus Division of Police conducted a review of Julep and recently put them on our banned list for special duty where they can't hire special duty officers anymore.
Thank you, Sergeant. And the last bit I will point out is that we've had multiple discussions too with the Short North Alliance about this location, and I do know that they have a good neighbor program as far as that involves a lot of the Short North businesses. And after this incident in September, Julep was removed from that list. So therefore, for all of these reasons and everything the Sergeant was discussing, we believe it merits an objection. All right, so now I'm gonna quickly go through the remaining objections that are from last year. A lot of the activity is very similar, although I think across the board for these renewed objections, there has been a slight downturn in overall issues at the locations. But again, with all of these, I am in contact and actively passing agreements back and forth with attorneys for all of these places. It's just nothing has been scheduled or determined at the division just yet. All right, so first up, we've got the Speedway, 6175 East Livingston. This is actually part of our sort of larger discussion that I mentioned earlier that we were having with Speedway, their council, their like citywide security folks. So very close to this location. The only very concerning incident that happened in 2022 was that there was a shooting in August directly at the location. Their runs are high, but again, we've actually talked with ownership there, visited, done a walkthrough, a security assessment of the location, and a lot of those calls are actually coming from Speedway staff. So it's on the right road, but still no final resolution or assurances that things will permanently be a little better there. All right, so next we have a Sunoco on West Broad Street, 2725 West Broad. This is actually one, I'm not sure if council member remembers from last year. Literally, as we were presenting these objections last year, someone came in and said they had just bought the business and are now managing the business. So we've actually negotiated primarily with the new owner. And I actually believe this is one, I was just talking to the attorney for this new ownership today, that we may have this figured out hopefully in the next couple weeks. But again, until we have, I's dotted and T's crossed, we still have some concerns about the activity here. I will say the numbers have been down from last year, but we did have multiple shootings, robberies, weapons offenses, and overdoses at the location. So that's why we're bringing it yet again. Next, we have the Safeway Mini Mart, also on West Broad Street. The establishment had seen significant gun and drug activity. The activity has still continued. down from the prior year. They have hired additional staff to encourage loiterers to move from the lot. We find globally that that is an issue across all of our markets, that you need to keep people moving. Sometimes it does require security, CPD, additional staff. So they have taken some steps there. And like I mentioned, this is the same where we are actively negotiating a resolution here. Still has not been scheduled, though. And then our final two are actually both UDFs. So, and UDF, much like Speedway, is actually, they globally handle their stores for the entire city. So both Detective Gant and myself have had discussions with their assigned security person for all of the city of Columbus. So we actually have an agreement that already is going to include an increase in actual private security at the location. We've done quite a bit of work, and just have not, again, signed any sort of final resolution here. Still a significant number of runs, especially at the Hague Avenue location that you see right here. A lot of overdoses. But that being said, again, we're right there, but not quite all the way, and the objection has not been scheduled before the division. And that is the same for the one on North High. So at this time, again, I just thank council for giving us the opportunity to present all of these, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah Pomeroy. Could you, I mean, you talked about the communication, you've talked about the amount of work that you do, but could you kind of like break that down on average? Like how much are you communicating with each of these individual businesses, including do you let them know like there's a hearing tonight, for instance, and that sort of thing? Yeah, so the biggest impetus for communication is a warning letter that something has happened, or that's either runs have got exceedingly high, or there's been known drug activity at the location, and so that it just kind of it does depend on the business sort of throughout the year. A lot of times the letter is actually from Detective Gant, so a lot of that outreach will go right to him, and I'm happy to have him, if he wants to speak to sort of his regular communications with anybody who responds to those letters. They're not coming from me, they're coming from police, because it is usually police activity that we are notifying them about. I will say each of those individual city departments, as they have, let's say, a health issue or a fire issue, and they're doing their regular inspections, that communication usually happens separate sort of from me. That's usually between the department, and I'm notified of it, how things going after the fact. As far as objections for tonight, I admittedly we did not individually go and say, hey, you're got a hearing tonight and you're being, objected against. I will say a lot of the liquor permitted establishments in the city are represented by the same handful of attorneys who I'm in pretty regular communication with. And so I know a handful actually already proactively asked for the list, and so I happily provide that, and I'm already, like I said, specifically with the Dollhouse, talking to attorneys there. But no, there was not a separate letter saying, hey, you are getting an objection here. That is part of the purpose of what we're doing here. And the last piece I guess I would add to that is that's why this is not necessarily the end of the process. In many ways, this is the beginning of sort of all right, we need to be serious now, because what ends up happening, and I think Detective Gant could certainly speak to this, is that a warning letter is one thing, and sometimes people take that very seriously. A lot of times people don't always take things as seriously until we get to this point. And that's why sometimes we have to get to this point. And I think, you mentioned the Sunoco last year in West Broad. I mean, obviously there were concerns about the new ownership, but you reiterated to us, at least last year, that, hey, we're going to continue to work with them. This doesn't mean that you're going to, we're not looking to shut them down if they want to come into compliance and operate a good operation in the city of Columbus. They want to work with you. It's those that blatantly disregard nor have any desire to change the way that they do business. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, very fair. And I think one of the benefits of, even though the backlog with the commission has elongated this process, and that's why we have ones that we're bringing again, the benefit to that is there is sort of a longer runway from which to sort of see, hey, how things are going. So yes, absolutely.
In your work over the year, how many different businesses didn't make the list? In other words, you, over the course of this past year, how many different ones did you talk to? How many have started on a path of correction, or they just didn't quite meet the threshold to actually object?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a second, I'm going to ask Detective Gant to say approximately how many warning letters he sent out this year. He can ballpark it. But I think, throughout the year, we are constantly evaluating. Any time that a community member gives us a location to look into, we take a look at numbers, we talk to police, we talk to fire, and it's sort of working through a process of we identify something, we look at what the numbers are, we look at what both community members and city departments have said, and then we decide, okay, does that need to stay effectively on a watch list to say, let's see how they're doing in another month, or let's see how they're doing in 6 months. And then if things are going well and we've potentially had a discussion with them, then it sort of falls off and we think, okay, that's on the right road. I would say as we get down to it, end of the summer is when we really start to really narrow things down in terms of, okay, what will we be considering for objections? What do we really need to take a final look at as we get to this point? I mean, you could have upwards of 30 or 40 as you get towards the end of the year. And we really try to be very judicious in doing an overview of, okay, not just what are the raw numbers. I know I've just put up all the stats for the numbers, but I actually take a look at each of those runs. And so does, and Detective Gant will take a look at all of the P1 police reports. And we will sort of go through that process of really doing an evaluation of each location, how they've done. And so that's why you get down to a much shorter list. I think compared to some of our compatriots in Cincinnati and Cleveland, I mean, we have less than half of the objections that they may bring, I think, as a result of the process that we have. And
I know we meet several times a year, talking about what that list looks like and the work that you're doing, and you've been real good about keeping us apprised, and thank you for that. Detective Gant, I would like to give you the opportunity to talk about your work, estimate on the number of letters, but also just your work in general in this space.
I'm honored to be able to speak to you, Councilman Ramey. I appreciate it. I work with the PACT unit, which was formerly Vice. I handle all the liquor and tobacco and abatement issues for businesses and bars. A lot of these places on the list, I'm gonna shoot out there and say maybe 40, 50 letters. It's usually 2 or 3 per business because I send it to the actual business itself, the property owners, and whoever the registered owner is through the state of Ohio, through if they have an LLC or anything. So it could be 2 to 3 for each address or for each business. I've worked with a lot of them. Speaking of the Sunoco that you brought up, I was just out there approximately 2 weeks ago and did a security assessment with the owner, walked the property, talked about things they could do to resolve it. Unfortunately, there was a lot of damage. There was a big tree next to it on the church property that fell over and destroyed most of where the gas pumps are and the overhang. So they're working on that, but they're more than willing to work with us. And I report everything back to Sarah. There are businesses that just don't respond back to the certified letters I send. They don't email, don't call, don't text. I let Sarah know about that as well. Basically, I answer any phone calls. I'll go out and meet with any owner, their lawyers. I met with a lot of the speedways. I've actually spoke with, they had a meeting with approximately 14 of the business managers, independent managers for the area. I got to talk to all of them, listen to their concerns, gave some recommendations. Basically, I'll go anywhere in the city, talk to anybody, work with liquor control quite often. I also, if Sarah isn't able, I spearhead the nuisance abatement group inspections on markets and bars. Anything I get done, all the violations with anybody in the group, I make sure that she gets all the information. And I also will testify in front of Liquor Control Commission Court, which happens about once a month, beginning of the month, every Wednesday, in case there are issues. That's about it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the work that you do in this space. That's really all the questions that I have. So with that, we do have one public speaker this evening, We've received 2 pieces of written testimony as well, and originally we had a few more speakers, but when we pulled the Midway liquor objection off the list, those speakers declined to continue to comment. So I'm appreciative to have Representative Latina Humphrey, State Representative, here tonight to speak on one of the objections. And so if you would come to the podium, you have 3 minutes. Obviously, state your name, your organization that you may represent, but look forward to your testimony. Thank you so much, Representative Humphrey.
All right. Well, good evening. I am State Representative Latina M. Humphrey. I happen to represent Ohio's 26th House District, which includes the entire south side of Columbus, entire east side of Columbus, and then those surrounding cities. But again, just thank you, Councilmember Remy, for allowing me to be here. And I am here on behalf of the constituents of Ohio's 26th House District, and more specifically, the family of Shamira Rhodes and Katera Griffin, to voice our objection to the renewal of a liquor permit held by the following permit holder who conducts their business in the Far East Area Commission. And again, to object the renewal of liquor permit number 1173846 held by DBA Lounge, currently doing business as Queen of Hearts Pub, located at York Plaza, 5512 East Livingston, Columbus, Ohio, 43232, or the associated address located at York Plaza, 5504-5532 East Livingston Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43232. The Far East Area Commission held a full commission meeting for which I was present on Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. The commission heard from residents, area block watch groups, tenants, located at the York Plaza following the shooting on September 25th, 2022. Queen of Hearts Pub, as you know, violated a court order which had been obtained on November 9th, 2021 for the premises at 5512 East Livingston Avenue and to its successor in interest. As you may know, the agreed court order resulted from nuisance allegations against the bar and the property owner brought by Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein's office. Again, Officer John Brown with the Columbus Division of Police provided information as to the shooting on September 25th, 2022, which resulted in the killing of a 17-year-old girl and a 30-year-old woman, of which were like family to me and also constituents of mine. The Far East Area Commission voted unanimously in favor of offering our support to the objection of the renewal of the liquor permit. I fully supported the vote of the commission. And at this time, I do welcome any questions Councilmember Remy may have.
Thank you so much, Representative Humphrey. I mean, of course, our condolences go to you and to the families of Shamira Rhodes and Katera Griffin. Such a tragedy to lose, but that's exactly why we're here tonight. And certainly, I think you might have caught a little bit that was an illegally transferred license. They were operating under a different, from a previous, the Pelican Club. So I don't think you're going to have any objections from this body in supporting that. And so we appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this and sharing the concerns of your constituents. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Councilman.
So that concludes the presentation this evening and this hearing. I'd like to end this hearing by thanking our presenters, Assistant City Attorney Sarah Pomeroy, for your participation tonight and great work throughout the year. I do want to thank the Detective Gant and Sergeant Kermode for being here and for having the opportunity to speak and learn more about what you do in your roles. We don't expect to see these liquor objections in front of council on Monday, December 5th. We expect to hear these, not we expect to hear these in front of council on Monday, December 5th, our next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you to the council team, Lucy Frank, John Oswald, Nia Hairston, Chloe Mulford, and Mark Carter, and to the CTV team for their assistance in preparing for this hearing tonight. I also want to thank the community for their support and for tuning in to tonight's hearing. Thank you all, and stay safe. Have a great evening.